Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you are watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. We answer your questions every day. Every morning, we answer your questions. Now, if you're in Mukana, you can ask those questions there. If you don't know what that is, go to officehours.global/join and you'll start getting emails every day, and we'll tell you what's coming up tomorrow and the next day and the next day. And we'll also give you links to Discord and links to Mukana. And if you're in there, you can ask those questions. You can vote on the questions. You can chat about the questions. You can chat about the show. All of those things are possible inside of there. But if you don't have that, don't worry. You can go to askofficehours.global. That's askofficehours.global, and you can ask your question there any time of the day, 24/7. And what we do is we look at those questions, and as long as they're one question at a time and they are tech related, we will throw them into the show usually the next day. So go ahead and throw those questions in. We'll be looking at them today as well during the show. So if you've got them, go ahead and throw them into askofficehours.global. Let's jump into those questions. Bill, what do we have?
First one comes from Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York today. Zach asks, I have a Blackmagic ATEM Mini ISO HDMI, and I'm wondering if the USB-C port can be used to send the record feeds to my computer, or if it is only for a USB drive. Thanks.
Go, Jesse.
It can absolutely be used to send a record feed to your computer. It functions as a webcam. And if you want to do a test record, what you can do is jump into QuickTime. And where's my mouse? There we are. And you can go to File, New Movie Record, and just set your input to your ATEM and do a direct record in QuickTime.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, but I'm thinking if he wants to record ISOs, you cannot record ISOs of the individual inputs of the ATEM like you do onto a USB-connected drive. You can only record the single video output that comes out as a webcam. And I don't think it always looks at the computer. When it sees a computer, it uses it as a client and instead of a host. So you have to choose a side. So I don't think it can choose a drive as a side if it's applying USB video.
And now you can, I think with the new update, you can send any single output to the computer. So you can send even your multi-view out. You can send all kinds of other things out of that USB-C. I really wish, I don't believe that you can send two different signals out of the USB-Cs, which I really wish. I bet you they're on the same bus. So I don't think that'll work. But that would be really great, is to be able to send, a multi-view out of one USB-C and your program out of another USB-C. Would be super useful, but that doesn't appear to be possible. But you're right; you need a hard drive to be able to actually get all of those ISOs out of the computer or out of the ATEM. Next question.
Paul Kovacs of Elkhart, Indiana is up next. Switching video-only angles in a multicam project in Final Cut Pro, getting a pop in the audio when switching video angle only. Done many times before without problems, except this time more adjustments, no effects, applied to each mono track inside the multicam clip.
Go ahead, Jesse.
I don't have a solution for this question in the software, but the first thing I would try to do is export the file and see if those pops occur on the actual export, or if it's something that's happening with the real-time processing in Final Cut.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, the order of operations in Final Cut, and in fact all software, really does kind of matter. In this case, I think you've kind of nailed what's going on. If you have a lot of adjustments that you're applying to the audio stream, understand that Final Cut is built around a reference metadata system. It doesn't necessarily bake everything in every time you do it. Rather, it looks at the original file and then it applies any metadata that amends that file. And the way you're doing it, then it's going into the multicam timeline, and then it's coming out the other end. I suspect that you've added enough stuff to that original file where in real time, without it being baked in, it's having a little bit of difficulty doing all that, plus applying those audio transitions smoothly. It's always a good idea in Final Cut to work with the cleanest files you can up until later in the process. So what I do is not put all of that stuff on your original clips first, or if you do that and you know you want to keep them, do that stuff export that as a master, bring that in, and then it'll be baked in and it won't have to do any calculations at all. I think that'll probably help you. I have heard of this happening on the boards before. People have talked about it, and it seems like it happens for a little while, then they change their workflow a little, and it goes away. They don't have to remember or deal with it anymore. So it is solvable, and you might want to go to some of the wider used boards and ask about pop-on switching, and you'll probably get a lot of people who have solved this problem before.
Very good, Courtney.
I was going to ask Bill, because I am not a Final Cut Pro. I own one, but I haven't used it in a long time. Ask Bill this question. Does it have, other editors have, especially audio editors, have the possibility to do a small crossfade, or to make sure that you only butt the sound from two clips up together on the next zero crossing point on the audio?
Yeah, most of the time it is not a problem. I do hundreds of hours of stuff and never have that 0 point crossing problem. So they have built in some algorithms to notice it and defeat it. But I have heard of this happening, and typically somebody says what this last questioner did. They processed a lot of the audio. Well, they've processed it by putting effects on it, but that doesn't mean that they've baked in those to the stream of audio coming out of it. So the program is taking the original audio always, in real time, applying whatever changes you've done to that, and then outputting on the other end. And it takes a little processing time, and sometimes I think that causes a glitch or something like that.
And is that audio still embedded with the video? So it's still in the multicam, because I don't think you hear the popping if you separated the audio out. So, and the reason I say this is because I do two system recording almost all the time. My audio is never part. I was trying to think. I was like, I've never had this problem, and then I was thinking through the issue, and then I realized, oh, it's because my audio is never connected to my cameras. So what I do is, because my audio is separate, I'm recording audio separately from my cameras almost all the time. I may pipe that audio into the cameras, but I don't really. All I use that for is to make sure everything's synced, right? So I don't do anything. Well, I just use that as a sync track, as opposed to sometimes I don't have time code or whatever. So, and usually with a camera, when I'm recording I'm actually recording an event this weekend. One mic will be the internal mic to the camera. One mic will come out of the system. That also shows me any kind of delay that the system might be adding or anything else that's there, because the camera's going to get it raw. And then I'm going to use that, usually the system track, the one that comes from the audio system, I'll have that track. And assuming that there's no change, I'll use that to line everything up, because, again, a lot of times I don't have time code. So
yeah, you've also told us you transcode a lot to a mezzanine format when you get a bunch of various things and you put them all into ProRes so that it's clean.
When I do records, typically, and again, I know that other people can do a lot of different things. When I do records, generally it's with HyperDex. If I'm doing a multi-camera shoot, I'm recording ProRes to HyperDex. Now, the shoot that I'm doing this weekend is a little different. I'm doing a shoot this weekend, and what we're doing is I'll do ProRes with a pretty good LUT out of the Blackmagic cameras. But I will record internally in the Blackmagic camera as RAW. So I have, the most content I could possibly have, well, not internal, but to a hard drive on the camera. That way I can really go back if I want to go all the way and fix it. But otherwise, the decks will pick that up. The other side of that, though, is I'm recording on a Scorpio. So I'm recording from the board onto a Scorpio. So I have that separate, and that could be a mix pre, it could be a Zoom. I just happen to the Scorpio is the easiest one for me to work with. But I have that audio separately. So what I do is I bring it into, whether it's Resolve or Final Cut or whatever, for multicam. Most of my multicams are in Final Cut. I actually barely know how to use the Resolve version of this. Sometimes I wonder if I know how to use the Final Cut version, but that's a whole other story. As Chris says, I edit. I'm not an editor. So I put the audio in separately. I put the video tracks in on top of that. I make sure that they're all lined up in the multicam so that the audio is all perfectly lined up there. At that point, I just cut the video. I don't hear any pops ever. And the reason is and what I would probably do here is what I would try if I was Paul, is take one of the audio tracks. I'm assuming that the same program is on all the cameras. Take one of the audio tracks out and detach it from your multicam clip, put it into an audio track underneath, and then see if you still have the clicks, and you won't. like it, you know, if it's outside of the multicam clip, multicam clip, I would be very surprised if you hear popping at that point. But I realized, I was trying to think through when I saw this earlier this morning. I was trying to think of like, why would I never hear that? And I realized it's because my audio is always a separate track to the video. It's never connected to it. In fact, it's one of the first things I do when I bring in almost anything into my editor or whatever, is I detach the audio from the video, because usually the first thing I'm going to do is resync the audio with the video, because usually my records are off by a couple frames. Next question.
Next question comes from Guy Cochran in Seattle, Washington. With just one frame of latency, should we be looking more at the Panasonic Kairos? And he's got a link there.
Grant?
Yeah, so Guy actually did some great coverage of that at the Panasonic booth at Infocom. Really enjoyed that, Guy. Thank you for all your time on that. And you know what it looks like? It kind of looks like a TriCaster made by Panasonic, and that's not to degrade it. I actually think it looks really serious. It's based on a Linux system, so it seems like basically a custom PC that they sell. It has a NVIDIA card in it, and then they've done a whole bunch of work to try to get the latency really low on it. And then one of the things they tout is that it can do as many video layers as the GPU will handle, which is somewhat similar sort of to vMix or something like that you can just keep layering it up until it stops working.
Yeah, that's the problem, right? Until it stops working is the key part of the sentence. Yeah. So it seems like a good idea, but on site is what they're saying. On site, you could do a frame of latency, which is pretty awesome. And they're talking about cloud production as well, and being able to run it in the cloud, and then be able to run a whole bunch of different types of inputs into it and come out of it. So it looks really good, but of course it's got a pretty big price tag. I was seeing tens of thousands of dollars to make it all work. So it might be of interest to some corporate customers, but yeah, I don't know. Not sure yet.
Yeah, when they come up with the Kairos Mini for $300, I'll be really interested. One of its claims to fame is that it handles inputs that are ST2110, SMPTE, basically IP-based video, and NDI, both in the same package without external converters. So you can send NDI or SMPTE 2110 digital serial inputs into it. So and mix them with. I guess I haven't looked. Is it HDMI or SDI as well inputs on it? So
I think it's SDI. I don't think it does. I don't know if it has any HDMI inputs.
Okay. So it does show computers being plugged into it, but I think it shows an external converter that converts it to.
It also says it'll
SDI.
take in SRT, RTMP, RT, SP, and RTP. So without any external converters. So it does have a lot of flexibility there.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. I mean, I think that Panasonic has got a lot. I started by the way on Panasonics. I mean, my very first thing was a data video, like a little all-in-one little suitcase. Well, before that there was something else. I can't remember, Envision or something. It was I used it once, and I think I should have sent it back. But
no toaster. You didn't start with a video toaster.
So the guys at the TV station had a toaster, but I wasn't allowed to touch it. At the time, because I wasn't skilled enough to touch the toaster. So I was stuck with Photoshop and Quark, and so I did the print stuff. My job was print, don't touch the video stuff. But yeah, the toaster was there. But by the time when Pixel Core started doing live, probably in 2004 or 5, we got this little software, little switcher, and it was horrible. We finally got the data video, and actually I launched my live streaming stuff on this little data video suitcase of a box that you'd open up all in one. We used Keynote for the lower thirds, and traveled all over the world with that suitcase doing that. But when we started growing up, we bought a Panasonic 450, and that was kind of our workhorse for, I don't know, a couple of years until the ATEM. It was kind of the workhorse, and then the little switchers started becoming the ATEM. The ATEM first, the little ATEM. The first one we got was the little, production studio, and then the 2ME, which was super exciting. And it has the fins on the back. I think I found one. I was spelunking in my garage and I found a 2ME. I might have to bring it in and show it to everybody what it used to look like. And then we moved to Blackmagic. I think that the real challenge is that Guy said that this is the hard part, is that Guy said it's $69,000 for the KC200, $20,995 for the KC10C2 control surface. And so it's an $89,000. What they looked at in the booth and what he was showing you was an $89,000. And what goes through my head with that is, sure, it has NDI, but there's a lot of, like, let's just say I stayed in the Blackmagic, thing, I could buy the new 120 by 120 router, which I somehow missed that. No one brought that up in our coverage of NAB, that there's a 120 by 120 router. I could buy that. I could buy a Constellation. I could buy 12 HyperDecks. I could buy, and I still have money for a Softtron and a whole bunch of other things. There's a lot of there that I could buy, and I can have a whole pipeline for the price of this switcher. And so I think that that's been typically Panasonic's challenge. I think that they don't do well in broadcast. So broadcast doesn't tend to use them. That tends to be the Ross, Sony, Grass Valley. They don't do, they haven't really, this is their first foray into the software switchers, but they're much more expensive than TriCasters. And I don't know if they're going to be that much more effective than TriCasters. And they have 2110, in that world, they have that. And then they have all these people that do events with Blackmagic hardware. I just think that they're in a really complicated, there's a really complicated place that they do fit. Integrators will use them for corporate installs, for smaller corporate and smaller sports. I think and it's usually just because of the integrator. There's probably great margins, for it. And I think that's but I find, in general, I felt like, after I left Panasonic, I haven't felt the tug to come back to their switchers. I mean, it's not that they're bad, they're just not very good. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, their demo video shows them using this Kairos giant switcher with something called GG glue, which is designed for giant LED screens for concerts where you're playing back video synchronized on multiple screens or over a giant wraparound LED wall. So I think for concert venues and those kind of things, this is for big name type of live events. Kind of
there's a lot of tools that do that that are a lot less expensive. That's my only. There's just a lot of things that put across. I mean, I've worked on shows 10 years ago that were 64:9. It's not like I'm not sure. I get that they and maybe they want to do it all in one switcher, but. The problem is they said we do 16:9 or we do 32:9. Well, there are 1,000 different aspect ratios that are used in events that don't include 16:9 or 32:9. That's a very the thing with LED walls is that's why you need something like Disguise or other things like that, is that you need to define that workspace and you need to define an arbitrary workspace and then arbitrarily put things on it. It doesn't work in a 16 or 32:9 world. Yeah, go ahead, Greg.
Well, you can see their layout there in that image.
Right, but I think they're still showing like a 30. I don't know what they said on their page was 32:9 or 16:9, and I was like, okay, well, but also it says not only in the standard of 16:9 format, but also in 32:9 format suitable for display walls. So that's. I was like, okay, well, that's a video person looking at event LEDs. Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, they were showing at Infocom. They were blending some projectors. They had double stack projectors, and they were blending it across, and they were doing 100 pixels of blend as well. And so it was showing that it could blend, but then they were using Resolum to play out. So they were running, Resolum to play into it to be able to run content.
For our listeners, does Resolum do blending? Oh
yeah, yeah, exactly. And this is what I was thinking, because you can argue that one of the advantages of a TriCaster is playback, is that you can play out video from it, or you can run graphics from it.
If you talk to guys who do broadcasts with TriCasters, the first thing they do is stop using the DDR. The first thing you got to do is stop using that. They have external playback for that because there's always a lag at the very beginning of the play out.
Yeah, you just want. This is what you say with TriCasters is they're great. You just don't try to do three things at once. You do one thing with it, and that's what I often see people end up doing is that they run it as a switcher and they do everything else. And I think this could be the same because it'll struggle to do some things. And Guy was awesome on site because they were playing back, and then he was like, oh, "Is that tearing a little bit up there? And is that freezing a little bit there?" It was like he was and he was very polite about it, but he was pointing out that it wasn't perfect.
And the problem is that if you're going to spend $90,000, it has to be perfect. Like it has to just work. Like you're out of the room. Once you go over $10,000 on a switcher, and I would say probably $5,000 on a switcher, it really has to work every time. Like it's, we're not in the market of it's a little thing anymore. I mean, you've got, again, Blackmagic kind of ruined that for everybody, to be able to have something that does most of these things really well for not very much money. And I'm always amazed. I just saw Blackmagic drop the price on something, or just their video assists, and I'm like, they just keep on wanting to not give up any space. Like they don't, they just keep dropping the price. As soon as they figure out how to do it cheaper, it's not like they go, oh, we'll make more money on that product. They're like, we're not going to let anybody else, we're going to try to keep everybody else out of that market by continuing to make it cheaper. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael's up next, and Douglas says, Anthropic has talked about how they infuse Claude 3 with a character in comparison to other large language models. Will character be a compelling competitive advantage for large language models in the future? And he's got a link there to the story.
Good, Bill.
Well, hopefully it doesn't sound too much like Scarlett Johansson because we're already having problems with that in there. And it just depends on how they implement it. Some people like that anthropomorphized kind of more personal style. Other people just want the data and anything you do with it that makes it more complicated or, I think this is going to be a toss-up for people using it. I mean, if it sounds a little like the guy who annoyed you in third grade, maybe you will not like having this character in there. But if it sounds neutral or very pleasant, or you can amend it to be a character of your choosing, maybe it'll turn out to be something that makes people more comfortable with talking to these large language models and AI things.
Good, Courtney.
I'm not sure they're talking about just the vocal characteristics. They're talking about opinions, so that the character, will align with your political views or align, and that could be very dangerous because then it's just going to create more siloing. I don't want my AI assistant to adopt my political and centrism or blend of my theories, my thoughts. To mimic my thoughts, because then you don't learn anything because it's just an echo chamber, So they're talking about actually, having it respond according to certain, your political alignment, your religious alignment, your sensibilities, your level of intelligence, etc.
It's interesting. It'll be interesting to see how it works. Again, to Courtney's point, it could be a mess, but also, I think that the AI is always aligning to some politics. It just depends on whose. Next question.
It can create its own conspiracy theories.
Yeah, exactly. I heard. Yeah, exactly.
I wonder if the computers will be arguing with each other. The models will be arguing. Russell Kay in Brooklyn, Maine is up next. Canon R5 in video mode at 23.98 P progressive can shoot at a shutter speed of 1/8 of a second. I'm working on a sequence about lightning bugs, so slower shutter is welcome, but I'm trying to wrap my head around this conceptually. Anyone have any ideas?
Go ahead, Jesse.
So I cooked up a little bit of a graphic just to try to illustrate this. On the bottom row, you're seeing 24 frames over 1 second, and on the top row, you're seeing 8 frames over 1 second. And what I'm trying to illustrate here is what you're doing when you push 1/8 of a second to 1/24 of a second is you're using that same frame 3 times to create your 24 frames per second. So it's just exposing one frame for 3 times as long as a 1/24th frame and then using it 3 times. So you'll have a brighter image, but you're actually getting a lot less data per second. If I were working on a project like this, I would do everything I could to cap it at 1/24th and use like a 1.8 or a 1.2 lens, as open up as you can get the lens, and then push your ISO, knowing that a little bit of noise reduction in post will create a better feeling, a better flowing movie than only using 8 frames per second.
All right, go ahead, Bill.
Everything he said. Plus, I'm going to add that if you get out of aligned frames, and we have this a lot happening in like the 24 versus 30 frame world, and we talk a lot about these phrases like 3-2 pull up or 3-2 pull down. You're taking an odd number of frames in the same temporal space and trying to map it to an even number of frames. It can be done, and we do those things a lot. 3-2 pull downs happen all the time, but there is some fractional leftover, and if it's not done properly, you can get circumstances where part of a frame overlaps and the luminance values shift because you're adding this many partial frames, or you're adding a third of a frame to the next iteration of that. And I've seen it happen where you get moving light or dark bars as it tries to do this badly. Most of the modern NLEs do it smoothly, and they'll do that pull up and pull down and keep everything in temporal match. But just watch out for it. Be careful if you're trying to get into something with odd shutter speeds and odd frame rates to map to your golden frame rate that you're going to deliver in.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I would see if your camera can vary its shutter angle to, like 320 degrees or almost all the way, all the time open. So you'll get a lot of motion blur. I was wondering if your reason for doing this, the 1/8 of a second, is to turn the lightning bugs that are flying into streaks. So they give that kind of effect of little streaks of light instead of little lights that come on and off. And aren't there plugins, Bill, that do the ability to average, to create streaking motion blur that takes the images from multiple frames and overlaps them into a single frame?
Yeah, there are plugins that will allow you to do that. Again, you're asking the computer to do the calculations. Now, computers are crazy fast now, and things that used to be problematic, they can calculate so rapidly that it looks great. I just do practical tests. If you're going to do this for something going out to a client, test first and make sure you're not running into some problem that you need to fix. You'll probably be able to fix it, but you need to know about it and address it in post.
Yeah, I don't know if you would actually get anything different than, I don't think it's possible to do more than 360 degree. So I think when you set it to 1/8, I think what you're really getting is 1/24th. So typically you're at 180 degree. I think anything under 1/24th is just going to be 1/24th. And I could be wrong. We're all answering this kind of theoretically because almost all of our cameras work 0 to 360 degrees, which is I'm closed or I'm completely opened. And so like at 90 degrees, that means your shutter is open 1/4 the frame. At 180 degrees, it's 1/2 the frame. And at 360 degrees, it's just open. Like it just, you're gathering it for the length of the frame. So I don't think you can go over 360 degrees because you can only go around once. So anyway, I don't think you're getting, I know that they're possible to set those shutter angles, and Mickey's saying it's possible to set the shutter angles larger than 360 degrees. I'd love to see what the effect looks like because it still has to close that frame. It's closing the frame and going to the next frame. So I don't know how what you're asking for is the frame to stay in buffer. Like otherwise it's just going to be that it's open for the length of the frame. So I would love to see someone do, rather than us kind of calculate it. I don't have a camera that does this. Like I don't have a camera that goes over 360 degrees. So I don't know why I would do that. Again, I would if you want to capture the long streaks, I would think about actually capturing potentially I know this will sound crazy, but capturing a higher frame rate. So think about capturing at 60 frames a second, or at, if you wanted to get back to 24, think about capturing 120 and then leave it open at 360. And here's why, is because you have a whole bunch of in-between frames. Then you take that into something like After Effects and you use an effect called time echo. And what time echo will do is it will take it'll take your frame, your main frame, and it will blend it with the frames that are going after it like this on either side of it. And so the more frames you have, the smoother you can make that motion blur. I use this a lot for time-lapse. So if I'm doing a time-lapse, a lot of people, when they do time-lapses of crowds, let's say I love doing time-lapses of event builds, when all the chairs are getting put up or all the scaffolding is coming up or whatever. And what I do is, instead of doing it every 5 seconds or every 1 second, I just shoot video, with my cameras. There's enough memory now. And then I take that into After Effects and I use this time echo. And what it does is it takes all those video frames and it blends them into these kind of beautiful, you just see all these people moving around and everything has its own motion blur to it. So I want more frames, not less frames. I know that sounds like, I would just, if you're out there, you're in Maine, there's lots of, they're there every night. I don't know if it's like Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, you got fireflies every night. Play with this a little bit. But I would love to see if you can play with this and actually show me that the motion blur is different between 1/8 and 1/24, because I'm not sold that it is. I'm 100% wrong. I could be wrong because I've never done it. But so that's theoretical knowledge, and as we all know, theoretical knowledge is almost worse than no knowledge at all. So I don't know what it is, but I will say that I have a theory that it's not, that the one that you setting it to 1/8 is not going to make any significant difference between, or 1/24. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, the one thing that it might do, since you're shooting lightning bugs outside, if you slow down the shutter so that instead of opening for a 24th of a second, it opens for a whole 1/8 of a second, it's going to get more illumination in. So you're going to get a brighter picture out of that, all other things being equal. The light hits the sensor longer, essentially, doesn't get cut off as much. That may be really good for what you're looking for, but it may also have other effects. So again, test. It could look beautiful, and it could be just what you're looking for because you're getting more light out of those little tiny bugs, and that might be just gorgeous. But test.
Nikki says that it does, so but I'd love to play with that. I'd love to see someone do some settings there because it seems like a very interesting puzzle there. Matt, in the same way that Russell said he couldn't get it around his head, I can't get that around my head until I see it. I just need to see what it's actually doing. Next question.
Guy Cochran in Seattle in the USA. Starlink Mini. What is it?
Go ahead, Grant.
Well, it looks pretty interesting. It's about the size of a MacBook, like a 15 inch that would fit in a backpack. And Musk was talking about that he was just testing it, and that it's half the price of the standard dish, which would make it around $250 US. And then it sounds like half the monthly subscription is interesting too. So that would make it cheap. Whether it maxes out at 100 meg, maybe it does on down. And he's getting nearly 12 meg up, 23 milliseconds latency. So always the trick, I think, with these is the challenge of being really close to the ground. And so pulling it out of a backpack and then just sort of setting it up on the ground, it may work okay. It certainly works better when you get them higher. I wonder if it's very different. But it is pretty amazing. I mean, to think, as I've said before, in Australia, we're a big country with not a lot of population. All the population is on the coast, and there's not much in between, in the middle. And so, taking one of these in the middle of Australia would be really amazing. So I love where it's going. I love that there's some different options now. Looks very cool.
Next question.
Gordon Lake in Los Angeles, California is up next. He says, what are your thoughts on the U.S. suing Adobe for making it difficult to cancel subscriptions?
Go, Jesse.
I saw that article come up in my feed, and it actually reminded me to cancel one of my Adobe subscriptions. And as I went through the process, it was not difficult at all. And it just makes me think, like, if you're going to sue, you better sue to win. And we'll see how it goes.
I don't know if that's really the policy for the FTC. I think it's like sue to get press. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I will just say this. I'm not going to talk at length about this because I'm a little annoyed because I just found that the last 2 years I have been charged for subscriptions that I wrote to them and asking them to cancel. I mean, I was very explicit and took a lot of time to try to detangle myself from Adobe, and I just found out yesterday that I'm still being charged. So I have 2 yearly subscriptions for a thing I haven't touched.
I go with Courtney.
This is a common problem. I think there has been legislation that addresses this because it has to be equally. I think the legislation says it has to be equally as easy to unsubscribe as it is to subscribe. And a lot of companies, like if I subscribe to Disney and I wanted to change my subscription to Disney plus Hulu since they bought Hulu, and I did an annual subscription. They said, well, you have to wait till your subscription expires. So I got to wait a year before I do this, So it's like, and I had to go up 3 levels of customer service to get them to rebate the rest of my year if I change, and they can't just change your subscription and apply your money. It's all of them make it easy to subscribe. You just click the button to sign up, but you want to unsubscribe, you got to call and talk to somebody and convince them, go through that department that tries to keep you engaged and talk to them for like 20 minutes and get them to stop hammering you to keep the subscription before they will actually disconnect it. That has been common with many, many subscription services.
Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of PR problems with Adobe at the moment. And what was interesting is I'm seeing a lot of ads for Corel Draw. Which is interesting, and they're trying, and you can.
Affinity is now 50% off. Like I think I just got something that said 50% off everything.
They're subscription based as well, but they do have a lifetime. Like you pay $1,000 or something, and you get Corel Draw for lifetime. But I'm not sure. But I think the PR issue, it's always a problem with their subscriptions on Adobe. You see it in forums all the time where they say, "Oh, if you threaten to leave, then they'll give you 50% off for the next year," and there's things like that. And you're like, why don't you just set the price at a reasonable price for everyone, rather than only for the people that threaten to leave?
Yeah,
we'll see.
No, I agree. And it's hard. I think the hardest part with subscriptions is mostly managing them. Like remembering that, because I have a couple different Adobe subscriptions, which I know about, but it's just like, and then you go, I've been paying for that for the last 3 months and haven't used that product. A lot of the 3D stuff that Adobe has, I need it every once in a while, but I really just need it every once in a while. And so I've definitely paid more than I would pay retail for those. And I think that's the challenge. I think the problem is that Adobe's so embedded, and it's very hard. The products that they make for some professionals are unmatched. Like they don't have any, there's nobody else in the market that can compete with them. I know that, have I tried. Like I find myself like I use Affinity Designer and Affinity Photo, and I try to do as much as I can. I think it's as close to Photoshop as I can, but I still find myself falling back to Photoshop. Like I need this thing. And I will say that the thing that I now use more than anything else is the generative fill in Photoshop is transformational. Like that's the problem is that it is so much better than everything else. And you use it, once you know how to use it, you use it so much that you can't, like the idea, like for $10 a month or whatever I'm paying for it, or $20 a month, I use it every day. Like I'm like, I need to make this picture just a little longer, a little higher. Or I need to take there's words or books or things that I need to take out of a background. And you just select, I've talked about this before, but for me, the big aha was someone sent me a photo and said, I need to get rid of this book. It's just a weird name. It was behind plexiglass outside with, scratches on the front and everything else. I just selected the book, said remove book, and gone. And it looked like nothing had ever happened to me. And so as someone who spent a lot of time with the clone tool, I was just like, oh my gosh, and they've been, and they, what that takes to do well would take hours, and it took me 15 seconds, and so the hard part that Adobe's pulled away. I think specifically in Photoshop, I don't know. I really don't think Premiere's competitive, to be blunt. I just don't think you can choose between Final Cut and Resolve, and I can see a bunch of reasons to go one way or the other. I just don't get Premiere at all. I'm on different forums where about once a week or twice a week, someone says, hey, what can I do? I'm tired of Premiere crashing. And I think After Effects has its own world that it lives in, and I think that it's successful. Those are, and the 3D tools are really good. The 3D tools, the substance tools are really good. So I think that Adobe has that, but they have a whole host of other things, and they want to bundle all of those together so that you have to buy them all, because none of us would buy most of them otherwise. You have to get the whole Pro app thing because they want to bundle all that stuff because they know that we need After Effects, and then we'll have to pay for everything else with it. So I do think that Adobe has not looked at this from a user experience. They're just making money, and I think that the problem is that they're changing, and I think this is an expression of that. They're changing the way that their own, you always want your consumers to love the product, love the brand. And I think Adobe is getting very quickly to a point where their consumers, the people, their client base is putting up with them. And that puts them in an unstable position, not so much right now, but everybody's looking for something else. And that's when you see a disruption where suddenly everyone leaves something, like something new product comes out and suddenly everyone left the old product and they were like, what happened to everybody? We had this huge market and then it was disappeared. That's because they were putting up with that brand or they're putting up with that service. And as soon as someone gave them something else, they went off to it. And I think that Adobe is in that position. I think that as long as they stay ahead, and they keep on building things like generative fill, they're going to be fine. But if they stall or if anyone catches up, I think that they could end up in a really prickly position. Next question.
Scott Tupper in Livermore, California is next. Has the panel had any experience using the newly released Dante Director? And he's got a link there to it.
Go ahead, Grant.
Well, I would like to say, Scott, that as possibly the latest graduate of the Dante certification level 3. I just did that yesterday. I would like to be able to say that I have used Director, which I haven't, but I have looked around at it, and it does seem like it's a combination of the domain manager in a way, and being able to do it remotely. So you kind of being able to open up a web portal in a sense and be able to access totally remotely the controller, the Dante controller, and then a whole bunch of status. So it's a subscription. It's $20 a month to be able to do it remotely. And I think where it comes into its own is where it would be big organizations that have a large Dante network across potentially multiple sites, and they want to just be able to monitor that in one single place and be able to administer it. And so I think it has value there. But I think possibly for some of the smaller users, like myself, that might have 20 or 30 devices, all mostly on the same network, accessing that remotely is probably going to be that I'll just log into the machine and access that from the machine rather than paying for another subscription to be able to do the same type of thing. So it looks good for big organizations.
Next question.
Next question comes to us from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. What's the sweet spot of price and performance for a minisforum PC with a minimum of 2 1 terabyte storage units, 64 gigabytes of RAM for running a LAMP, WAMP, or MAMP server, Linux, Apache, MySQL, PHP, Linux, W Windows, and U Mac is his code there at the bottom.
Good, Courtney.
Wow. Talk about a tough question.
Very complex.
I looked at the minisforum, and if you look at the, what's available here, there are, like 40 or 50 mini PCs here, and that range in price from several $1,000s to $160. And so finding the one that handles all those different variations sounds like a job for AI. So I actually asked Copilot your question, and it came up with the HX99G model, starts at just over $1,000, which is a competitive price considering its specifications. If you're looking for a mini PC that can handle home server environment efficiently, the Neptune HX99G offers excellent performance in a small footprint, making it an ideal choice for your requirements. So that's the answer from Copilot. You could have just asked them, I guess.
Next question.
Next question comes to us from Douglas Carmichael. Rwanda's Royal FM deployed a virtual radio station with video using LAWO solutions. Alex, do you know of them? And he's got a link there.
I don't know of them, but it actually looks like a pretty in-depth release. I did reach out to some folks, and I just haven't heard back yet. This is their setup here, and you'll see let's see what to do. So this is a really nice setup. So it's very, very shiny. This is out of Kigali, I believe. It'll be interesting to see. It looks great. I haven't heard it yet. But I will say that this is a very I feel like it must have been done for the photo, because this is a super non-ergonomic way to put those screens. And so I feel like they must have done this for the photo, because you would almost always pull the screen up about at least 20, 25 degrees. You'd see tons of reflection here if you didn't pull that up. So I feel like they must have either that. I would argue with that design if it's not just for the photo, but it's a flat surface like that would be very hard to use, in my opinion, especially in an area that's got a lot of bright things around it. So it'd be interesting to see, but we'll see if we can't. I reached out to some folks in Kigali, of course, as most people know. I worked on a school there that runs in Kigali. So we'll see if we can't maybe even do a walkthrough with them. We'll find out what's going on. It'd be really interesting. So thanks for the heads up. Next question.
Pedro Gonzalez in Oklahoma is up next. 42-inch monitor with built-in KVM. Is this the ultimate work-from-home monitor? And he's got a B&H link there.
Go, Jason.
Yeah, looks pretty cool. I have used one of these quad monitors for a really long time. It's probably about 42 inches. If you look off to this side, it will take 4 1080p's, or actually 4 4Ks, and then just kind of scale them down into 1080, and I can do any variation therein, and the interface is easy. Mine is from LG. Yours looks pretty great. So yeah, I don't know. If you got the money, give it a shot.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Guy Cochran in Seattle, Washington. A Mac Mini in the cloud. What could you use it for?
I think that in our community, the most common thing I hear people do is use Zoom ISO in it. Zoom ISO is only on that. I mean, I imagine you could use it for tiles as well. From a Zoom perspective, and then not many. I have a hard time seeing how I would use that very often. Where I talk to people, then they use it is oftentimes when they're doing testing across. Oh, we want to test a whole bunch of configurations, or we want to test a whole bunch of things at one time. Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, as Guy knows, I have a Mac Stadium instance, so an M2 Mac Mini sitting in Mac Stadium, which is in the Vegas data center of theirs. So it's sitting on a 1 gig connection of internet up and down. It's 1 gig, and it's in a quality data center, and it's full hardware, and I have full access to that. What I run on it most of the time is Zoom OSC, and so I can do things like pulling the chat out and running that off to a web, out to web views and things like that. And it's just something that I don't have to worry about on site anywhere. I can just have it kind of doing these web services. One of the things it does for me as well is monitors after hours and gives me a little insight into what's going on there, and that's really handy too. And then when we're in show and we are running multiple instances into one Zoom meeting and we need to manage failover, we have that running. One of the things that you get is a public IP from Mac Stadium, and so now I'm able to access Companion on that device and run, commands to Zoom OSC, and I'm able to control a whole bunch of things in Zoom, sort of externally on a machine that's sitting in the cloud very reliably. And so I can do failovers and things like that. So I can hit a button and it'll fail over if I need to do that for different meetings. So it works really, really well. And Guy, perhaps you might know someone that could run their own data center from their own house. and could have a bunch of Mac Minis. That would be very interesting, particularly with a 10 gig connection or even a 50 gig connection, which I believe is possible for Guy. So it'd be very cool.
Next question.
Next question comes to us from Bobby Rafferty in Central Florida. Can you use equirectangular images for Apple Vision Pro?
Go, Jason.
You can, but they really don't like them. They want to make it really clear that it's not one of their spatial video or spatial images. So on the left is Apple's documentation. What it says is, if your content uses an equirectangular or fisheye or other non-rectilinear projection, don't encode it as spatial media. There is a way to do this, and the way to do it is you actually have to yank it out of photos and then just kind of view it as a normal piece of media, and then it will work.
Next question.
Roz Humphreys in Comax, British Columbia. Apple Motion project to Final Cut Pro. I'm manipulating a PNG with no background and have my project set to transparent, but after encoding to ProRes 444, the content still has a background. Any ideas?
Jesse?
The first thing I would check is when you go to share and export to movie, go to your settings and just make sure that you've got a color plus alpha and not just color.
That's gotten me a couple times.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Bill.
I think he nailed it. For some reason, it was not passing along the alpha channel bits, and that's probably what it is. Fingers crossed that it's a simple solution like that.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael. Could a Starlink Mini and a LiveU be a useful reporter's kit?
It definitely could, I think. I think that is it's a little bit of a setup. Here's the thing with the reporters is, number one is they're almost never live. So 99% of the reporters are never live. And I used to have a flat in DC, and I used to walk to my old office used to be at 20th and M, which was the heart of PR firms, and it was actually where Eurovision is located. And so there's lots and lots of reporters. And so you'd see all these, and I'd walk to the office every morning, and I'd walk through all these reporters reporting on whatever it is. And what they mostly had now were iPhones, these are international reporters, iPhones with little mics and it all. And you know what? I went and looked at some of their footage. It looked the same. It was them sitting there talking about it, but they were doing hits. So they would have what they wanted to say. They would do the hit, and then they would deliver that to the news organization, and it would be a pretty quick hit there, and then someone would throw it to them, and they even make it sound like they were there, like, thanks, Bill, this is da-da-da-da, or whatever it is. And so the reality is most of them aren't going live. If they are going live, the hard part with LiveUs is that they do have a little bit of latency to them. Sometimes that works, and even when you watch Sunday morning shows right now, the latency, I think a lot of people are using LiveUs, and they're using other things for it, and you're seeing this kind of slow back and forth. There was one that was with Janet Yellen over the Sunday morning. I think it was this week with George Stephanopoulos, whatever. And it was just the most uncomfortable conversation and I didn't realize how important it is to nod, like you're listening to them, because she just sat flat and it just looked like she was lost. And then she would say something and then start up very slowly. And I was like, more media training. So she had good things to say, just very slow. But I realized after it looks like she's going very slow, and it doesn't make her look smart. When that gap is really, really important, because when you have a reporter, but if you're dealing with a pundit or someone who's supposed to be a content expert, that gap actually makes them not look very smart. It makes them look like they're trying to find the answer as opposed to just responding. It's very unnatural, and I think that, and we see it a lot in news. It's bad form. There are solutions that will bring people in, and I think actually a little bit of frame loss would be worth having a tighter conversation most of the time. And we went through this kind of height where we had it pre-COVID. We had really good. Most people were on fiber, they were coming back and it was really getting to a point where that response was really good. And during COVID, the broadcasters didn't get any complaints when they slowed it down, and then they're like, okay, well, we save money this way. And I think that again, we vastly underestimate the power of subconscious. In the sense that that people will not complain. Just because people don't complain and just because they don't notice doesn't mean it doesn't affect them. Like it's, it affects how they feel about this. And I've been in lots of conversations about how people feel about the content that they're in. And when you look at, they don't trust the media, they don't trust the politicians, they don't trust those things. All of the bad video and slow video is not the cause, but it contributes to the problem. It's not the poison itself, but it makes it worse. It's a comorbidity for how people feel like it. So the issue is that it's really, I think that I would say no if you're trying to do live hits, because I think the latency is too high. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Latency is an issue, especially with commercial, like you say, commercial broadcast satellites that they use for two-way communications on the live network shows. Usually it's about 2 seconds or so, which is kinds of makes for an awkward delay, and people tend to interrupt each other or talk over each other. SpaceX, as far as using the Starlinks, I think they said, what did they say earlier? 10 megabits up was the speed of, and you need 5 minimum to do 1080p up normally with H.264 compression or whatever they're using. But I did find an article here that says that they're trying to reduce the latency of Starlink to less than 20 milliseconds. That's a half a frame. So if they can do that, then it will be quite good for doing that, as long as they can keep the bit rate up to handle live video. Well, maybe that latency is only with, something that's not video.
I still feel like that's a physics problem, but like it's a lower
low Earth orbit compared to the ones that are geostationary. They're 20 times as far away, and it's a matter of physics.
But if we come back to that, there is a loss in latency just by using the LRT inside of the LiveU. Like we use a LiveU for our coverage. We love LiveUs. I use LiveU. I use a LiveU probably at least 2 times a month somewhere, doing something. So they're great backpacks. As a two-way communication, I don't think they're as great as some people sell them as. I just feel like it's a little slow. And because when you turn them down, you start getting all kinds of losses. And I feel like you're still better off oftentimes with WebRTC.
Well, you're jettisoning the problem of bonding, which takes up some latency time. But so if you're not using bonding, if you're just using a single point to the satellite and not having to bond cellular together, then
good luck.
Then you may be able to reduce the latency quite a bit.
I mean, I have a Starlink. It's not. I would never depend on it for hits. Like it's cute when it works, but it's not. It's not a workhorse. Like it's really unstable. Next question.
Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas is in with, how can the Hollyland Lark M2 mini mic blow away DJI and Rode for performance and price? That's $159 US. Mark Bennett lays it out here, and he's got a link to a YouTube video.
Go ahead, Bill.
So the question is, what does it sound like? And that's really hard to tell. I watched the video. I was listening to it. I don't know, if they were actually using the system. You would hope they would. I mean, they're making a video on YouTube. They have a wireless microphone solution. They say it's the best thing since sliced bread. You'd hope they were using it. They might not have been. They also might have had their sound go through a separate EQ process. It seemed to me what I heard on that has a pretty pronounced mid-range. It seemed a little harsh to me, but again, all those caveats, but listen to it. Does it really sound clean? If so, that's a different story.
And coming up next, we have, we're going to be talking about hand motions, hand motion capture. Super excited to talk about this. But also later this week, Robert Lighthouse is going to be on. That's tomorrow. Right? He is an incredible blues artist from Sweden who hung out with Hopis. It's very complicated and it's very interesting, and I think we're going to have a great time learning more about Robert Lighthouse tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. VisVector, we're almost ready to start doing a show. Grant, who's here, is going to be hosting a show Monday, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time in Vector. How is it going to go?
Wait.
We don't know. So anyway, we're gonna be doing that. But Grant has been willing to take that on. I'll be one of the panelists, and so we'll. But we're going to be testing VisVector. We'll talk about on Thursday. We'll talk about our progress and where we are. We've got almost everything all working, and we just felt like the only way to do this is to do it. So we're going to be doing it on Monday. And if it's successful, if a lot of you all show up and the show goes relatively well, we're going to keep doing these. So we're going to take a week off for 4th of July, and then we'll jump into it and start doing it every week. Friday, we're going to talk about network layering and hierarchy. So this is where our tech guys get geeky, and they're going to be talking about network layering and hierarchy on Friday. So stay tuned for that and get your questions ready for that show. Saturday, of course, is Q&A. Also on Saturday, volunteer meeting, 9 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. So if you're interested in volunteering, or if you're already a volunteer, we'll be meeting there at 9 o'clock. It runs about an hour. Sunday is introspection. It's the best day to just ask questions. Why are we doing what we're doing in office hours? We changed the entire format of the second hours that will come up in the next couple weeks because of Courtney, because of a 45-minute conversation about the structure of the second hour. So that's the kind of stuff that happens on Sundays. And of course, we are a volunteer organization, and we depend on your donations. So go to officehours.global/donate. Now let's jump into the second hour.